The morning air in Harbor's End was crisp, the kind that hinted at the coming chill of autumn. Donovan Pierce adjusted his cap, the brim casting a shadow over his eyes as he stepped out of his modest home. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional chirp of birds and the distant hum of a delivery truck. He had a routine. Sunday mornings meant a trip to the local hardware store to pick up supplies for the week's projects. As he approached the store, a sense of unease settled in his gut. 2 patrol cars were parked haphazardly outside, their lights off but presence unmistakable. Donovan hesitated, then shook off the feeling. He had nothing to hide. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Donovan made his way to the aisle with the paint supplies, selecting a few cans and brushes. As he turned to head to the register, he found himself face to face with Deputy Rowan Fletch and Officer Blaine Turlow. "Sir, we need to speak with you," Fletch said, his tone devoid of warmth. Donovan raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem, officers?" Turlow stepped closer, his hand resting near his holster. "We've had reports of suspicious activity matching your description." Donovan's heart pounded. "I'm just here to buy supplies. You can check the security footage." Fletch's eyes narrowed. "Identification now." Donovan reached into his wallet, pulling out his military ID and driver's license. Turlow snatched them, examining them briefly before nodding to Fletch. Without warning, they grabbed Donovan, twisting his arms behind his back and forcing him against the shelves. The cans of paint clattered to the floor, spilling their contents. "You're making a mistake," Donovan grunted, pain shooting through his shoulders. Fletch leaned in, his breath hot against Donovan's ear. "Stay quiet if you know what's good for you." The commotion drew the attention of other shoppers, some pulling out their phones to record the incident. Donovan's eyes met those of a young boy clutching his mother's hand, fear etched on his face. Back at home, Eliza Pierce sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee. The phone rang incessantly, news of her son's arrest spreading rapidly. She turned on the television, the screen displaying footage of Donovan being manhandled by the officers. Her heart ached. She knew her son, knew his integrity and strength. This was not justice. As the day progressed, the footage went viral. Social media platforms buzzed with outrage. Veterans organizations issued statements condemning the officers' actions. Protests began to form outside the Grayson County Sheriff's Department. Inside the department, Commander Harlan Bricks watched the footage, his face pale. He knew this was bad. The public outcry was growing, and pressure mounted for him to take action. Donovan, released later that evening without charges, returned home to find his porch adorned with candles and notes of support. Eliza embraced him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You stood tall, son," she whispered. He nodded, the weight of the day's events pressing heavily on his shoulders. The next morning, the town of Harbor's End was anything but quiet. News vans lined the streets, reporters eager to cover the unfolding story. Donovan, however, remained inside, avoiding the media frenzy. A knock at the door interrupted his solitude. He opened it to find Soraya Lang, a reporter from Channel 9 News. "I'd like to hear your side," she said gently. Donovan studied her for a moment before stepping aside. "Come in." They sat in the living room, the camera rolling. "What was going through your mind during the arrest?" Soraya asked. Donovan took a deep breath. "I thought about all the times people like me don't get the benefit of the doubt. I thought about my service, my community, and how easily it was dismissed." The interview aired that evening, Donovan's words resonating with viewers nationwide. Calls for justice intensified. Commander Bricks, facing immense pressure, announced that Deputies Fletch and Turlow were placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Despite the developments, Donovan remained cautious. He knew the fight was far from over. Late that night, as he sat on the porch, a car slowly drove by. The driver, obscured by shadows, paused briefly before speeding off. Donovan's instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. The next morning, he found a note slipped under his door. "Stay silent or else." His hands trembled as he read the words. The battle for justice had just taken a darker turn. If you're enjoying this so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps us grow and lets us keep bringing you more content like this. Plus, you won't want to miss what we have coming next. Trust me, it's going to be good. The morning sun cast long shadows over Harbor's End, but the warmth did little to thaw the chill that had settled over the town. Donovan Pierce sat at his kitchen table, the silence broken only by the ticking clock and the occasional clink of his spoon against the cereal bowl. The events of the past week played on a loop in his mind, the confrontation, the cuffs, the flashing cameras. A sudden knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. Eliza Pierce, his mother, opened it to reveal a young woman clutching a manila envelope. "Mr. Pierce?" she inquired. Donovan stood, nodding. The woman handed him the envelope without a word and departed. He opened it to find a series of photographs, grainy stills from a security camera. They depicted the incident outside the hardware store, but from a different angle. In these images, Deputy Rowan Fletch and Officer Blaine Turlow appeared agitated, their expressions twisted in anger. One photo showed Fletch's hand reaching for something on his belt, not his cuffs, but a small, unmarked device. Donovan's brow furrowed. He hadn't noticed that during the altercation. He flipped through the photos until he found a note tucked at the bottom. They were looking for something. "You're not the first." The word sent a shiver down his spine. He picked up his phone and dialed Soraya Lang, the reporter from Channel 9 News. "We need to talk," he said. At a secluded booth in a downtown diner, Donovan slid the photographs across the table to Soraya. She examined them, her eyes widening. This changes everything," she whispered. Donovan nodded. "I need to know what they were after." Soraya leaned in. "I've been digging. There's a pattern, similar incidents in neighboring counties. Veterans mostly. All with spotless records, all detained under dubious circumstances." Donovan's jaw tightened. "Why?" She hesitated. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." Later that day, Donovan visited the local library, poring over newspaper archives and public records. He found reports of veterans arrested for minor infractions, jaywalking, loitering, expired tags. Each case dismissed quietly with little fanfare. He compiled a list of names and reached out to them. Some were reluctant to talk, others eager to share their experiences. A pattern emerged. Each had been approached by law enforcement under the guise of routine checks, then questioned about their military service, specifically about any classified missions or operations. Donovan's mind raced. What were they looking for? Armed with this information, Donovan returned to Soraya. Together, they confronted Commander Harlan Bricks at the Grayson County Sheriff's Department. Bricks, flanked by his deputies, maintained a stoic demeanor. "We have evidence of a targeted campaign against veterans," Soraya stated, placing the photographs and testimonies on his desk. Bricks glanced at the materials, then met Donovan's gaze. "You don't know what you're getting into." Donovan stepped forward. "Enlighten me." Bricks sighed. "There's more at play here than you realize. Orders from higher up. We're just following protocol." "Whose protocol?" Donovan demanded. Bricks remained silent. That evening, Donovan received an anonymous call. A distorted voice instructed him to meet at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Against his better judgment, he went. Inside, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man in civilian clothes, but with a military bearing. "Name's Harris," he said. "Used to work in intelligence." Donovan crossed his arms. "Why am I here?" Harris handed him a dossier. "There's a covert operation targeting veterans involved in specific missions. They're being monitored, detained, and questioned under false pretenses." "Why?" "Because someone believes they know something that could expose a larger conspiracy." Donovan flipped through the dossier, recognizing names and faces. His own was among them. As Donovan left the warehouse, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. Back off, or there will be consequences." He looked around, the hairs on his neck standing on end. The quiet town of Harbor's End was no longer safe. The town of Harbor's End wasn't asleep. It was holding its breath. 3 nights after the break-in at Donovan's home, the street outside Eliza's house stayed lit, neighbors watching, phones in hand, car engines idling just long enough to remind the shadows that someone was awake. Donovan hadn't spoken to anyone since that night. Not really. He sat by the front window, the same place he'd stood while a masked man smashed his silence and his sense of safety. The police had found nothing. No fingerprints, no boot prints, no camera footage from the town's public buildings. Just a shattered back door, a desecrated living room, and a single word scratched onto the fridge door in permanent marker: liar. He hadn't told Eliza about that part. She didn't need more worry. The sheriff's department had sent someone to investigate, but it was little more than a courtesy call. Deputy Morley, a younger one, clean-shaven, jittery, had come in, taken notes, then left without asking a single question about Donovan's ongoing case or the officers now suspended. He hadn't even glanced at the word on the fridge. Donovan knew why. Someone wanted him quiet, intimidated, but they didn't know him, not really. He wasn't backing down. Not now. 2 days later, a meeting was called at Grayson County Courthouse. Not public, not announced, just a quiet gathering of key figures behind closed doors. But it leaked. Everything leaked now. Donovan got word from Soraya Lang, the Channel 9 reporter who'd interviewed him in the park. They're trying to reach a quiet settlement, she told him over the phone. Internal, financial, no public admission of wrongdoing. If you don't show up, they'll assume you're folding. I'm not folding, Donovan said flatly. I didn't think you were, she replied. He hung up and stood staring at his reflection in the hallway mirror. His own eyes looked back at him, older somehow. Sharper. Something had shifted in him since the night of the break-in. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was hunting the truth. At the courthouse, the mood was tight. 2 lawyers from the sheriff's department sat at the long wooden table across from Donovan, and a civil rights attorney who had taken the case pro bono. Commander Bricks wasn't in the room. Neither was Officer Turlow or Deputy Fletch. But they didn't need to be. Their presence hung in the air like smoke. The lead attorney, a stiff man named Lowell Darnett, cleared his throat. Mr. Pierce, we understand the emotional strain this incident has caused. Our intention is to resolve this matter amicably, for the sake of the community. He pushed a single sheet of paper across the table. Donovan didn't touch it. What's the catch? His lawyer asked. Darnett blinked slowly. In exchange for the settlement, Mr. Pierce agrees not to pursue further legal action or participate in any additional public media engagement regarding the event. So that was it. Silence. Bought and boxed. No apology? Donovan asked. We believe this solution avoids the need for one, Darnett said. Donovan pushed the paper back across the table with 2 fingers. You believe wrong. He stood and walked out without another word. That night, Eliza found him sitting on the back steps, staring at the hole where the new door hadn't yet been installed. They want this buried, she said gently, handing him a cup of coffee. They want me erased, Donovan replied. Eliza sat beside him, silent for a while. Then, you're gonna have to make him look, son. Make it so they can't blink. And that's when the idea came. The next morning, Donovan called Soraya again. Not for an interview this time. For access. He wanted footage. Not the clip that had aired. The raw files. All of it, unedited, uncut. Channel 9 had recorded for over 2 hours that day in the park. Most of it hadn't aired. Soraya hesitated, but agreed. Come down. I'll see what I can do. What Donovan found stunned him. Among the raw footage was a brief moment, a glint of something in the background. At the 23-minute mark, while Soraya was adjusting her mic, the camera panned across the park and accidentally caught sight of 2 men standing near a black SUV. Both in plain clothes. Both watching him. Zoomed in, the resolution was rough. But Donovan knew those faces. One of them was Deputy Fletch. The other? He recognized him, but not from Harbor's End. It took him half the night to place it. A man he'd seen on base years ago. Military police. Dishonorably discharged after a scandal that got buried before anyone could dig too deep. The man had disappeared after that. Now he was standing in Harbor's End, watching Donovan give an interview, days before the break-in. Why? Donovan went to the town library. The internet was safer there, less traceable. He started pulling files, public records, newspaper archives. And something else began to take shape. Connections. Commander Bricks hadn't always been commander. 15 years ago, he'd been stationed at Fort Willard, a base with a history of racial incidents swept under the rug. He'd served with several officers who left under quiet circumstances. One of them, this mystery man now seen beside Fletch. More digging. A pattern. Several former MPs from Fort Willard had later found work in small-town departments across the region, including Grayson County, including Harbor's End. What if the incident with Donovan hadn't been isolated? What if it was part of a culture that never got purged, just relocated? Donovan printed what he found and drove straight to Channel 9's station. I need this story told, he said. Soraya looked at the files, eyes wide. This is bigger than your arrest. I know, Donovan said. And if we run it, if we name names, things could get dangerous. I know that too. She paused. You ready for that? Donovan looked her dead in the eye. I was born ready for it. The story aired that Friday night. Not just the footage, the full web. A report tracing the quiet movement of former MPs with abuse records into small-town law enforcement. A culture of secrecy, silent hires, protected names. It sparked immediate outrage. Within hours, the governor's office issued a statement. A full investigation into hiring practices across rural counties would begin immediately. Names would be reviewed, records reopened, and for the first time, Harbor's End wasn't just reacting. It was reckoning, but not everyone was thrilled. 2 nights after the story aired, Donovan found a note taped to his front door. "You don't know who you're messing with. Stop." It wasn't signed. That same night, Soraya's car tires were slashed outside her apartment. Donovan refused to stop. He met with Reverend Braxton at the community center. They organized a town hall. Veterans showed up. Teachers, pastors, even a few officers in plain clothes. But not Commander Bricks. He'd stopped showing up altogether. Word was he'd taken a leave of absence. That's when Donovan got another message, this one hand-delivered. From an anonymous source. Inside a plain envelope, a flash drive. No note. No explanation. He took it to a trusted tech friend in town, Micah, a former signals analyst from his unit. They plugged it in. Files loaded. Videos. Audio recordings. One file stood out. An internal sheriff's department meeting. Date stamped just 2 days before Donovan's arrest. On the audio, he wants to walk around like some kind of hero. Let's see how he likes a little humility. Do it clean. Quick. Make it look routine. It was Bricks's voice. Clear. Unmistakable. Micah looked up, pale. "You have him. Dead to rights." Donovan nodded slowly. "I don't want revenge," he said. "Then what do you want?" "Truth." They sent the files to Soraya. Channel 9 ran a second expose. This time, there were no denials. Bricks resigned within 24 hours. The sheriff's office was placed under temporary state supervision. Charges were filed, not just against Bricks, but also against Fletch and Turlow. A full civil rights lawsuit was launched. Donovan's name was no longer just a headline. It was a reminder that standing still doesn't mean doing nothing, that sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest weight. Months passed. Harbor's End didn't forget. New hires were reviewed by independent panels. Bias training became mandatory, and a statue was proposed for the Veterans Square, not of a soldier in battle, but of a man standing with his hands at his side, calm, steady. A figure of strength without violence. Donovan declined the statue. He didn't want to be made of bronze. He wanted to live. One fall morning, as leaves crunched beneath boots and the wind carried the soft scent of cedar and rain, Donovan walked through the center of town. People greeted him differently now. With honesty. With care. Not out of pity. Out of recognition. He stopped by the hardware store. Looked at the spot where it all began. A kid on a bike passed and waved. "Hey, Mr. Pierce." Donovan smiled. "Just a little." "Hey yourself." The kid pedaled off, free and light. Donovan watched him disappear down the hill. He turned back toward the town. A voice from behind stopped him. "You ready for what's next?" It was Soraya. He didn't answer right away. Just looked up at the sky, breathed in the wind, and nodded.